Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak to your spirit today. I want to awaken your discernment and empower your identity. You were never created to live in the shadows of manipulation. You were born for dominion, not deception. But many of you have found yourselves entangled with people who wear the crown of charm, but carry the sword of sabotage. They wear smiles like masks. Their love, conditional. Their applause, strategic. Today, I will expose what the narcissist secretly hates, but pretends to love. Because when you understand the truth, you will no longer be a prisoner to performance. You were not born to be used. You were born to rule. They say love is about closeness, connection, and knowing someone deeply, don't they? But what happens when a person pretends to want intimacy, yet secretly fears it? That's the reality when you're dealing with a narcissist. You see, a narcissist doesn't hate the idea of being desired. They love admiration. They love attention. But what they cannot handle is emotional nakedness. They don't want to be seen. They want to be watched. There's a difference. Being watched is about image. It's about control. Being seen is about authenticity. It's about vulnerability. And vulnerability is something a narcissist can't afford. Because vulnerability means you might discover that beneath the charm, beneath the charisma, beneath the compliments and seduction, there is emptiness. Not the kind of emptiness that invites healing, but the kind that fears exposure. The narcissist survives through performance, not presence. They perform love. They perform concern. They perform empathy. But performance is not partnership. It is manipulation wrapped in affection. When a narcissist pretends to want intimacy, what they really want is control over your emotional access to them. They create the illusion of closeness to keep you emotionally invested. They'll say all the right things. They'll mirror your dreams. They'll reflect your values at first. They're like emotional chameleons, adapting just enough to keep your interest. But the moment you start seeking depth, the moment you reach for consistency, for truth, for presence, something shifts. You'll feel the withdrawal. You'll hear the excuses. You'll notice the deflection. They might say you're too emotional, or you're making something out of nothing. What they're really saying is you're getting too close, because real intimacy would require them to be accountable, not just adored. It would demand that they show up even when there's no applause. It would force them to take off the mask, and that's what they hate most. Narcissists don't fear rejection. They fear detection. They know that if someone sees them for who they really are, flawed, fragile, fearful, they lose the power they've worked so hard to gain. So they create a counterfeit closeness, one where you share your secrets, but they never share theirs. One where you reveal your wounds, and they offer temporary comfort, but only so they can use your pain as leverage later. They are fascinated by your openness, not because they value it, but because it gives them a map of your heart. And once they have that map, they know exactly where to press when they want to control you. They'll call it love. They'll call it chemistry. But it's not intimacy. It's interrogation disguised as affection. Every deep conversation you think you're having is being stored as a tool for future manipulation. That's why many people who've loved a narcissist feel emotionally exhausted. You gave what was sacred, and they treated it like strategy. You opened your soul, and they used it like a script. Because a narcissist doesn't want a partner. They want a prop. And as long as you play your role, the show continues. But the moment you ask for real connection, when you ask them to meet you in honesty, consistency, transparency, the script falls apart. The actor forgets their lines, the performance ends, and in that moment you'll see the truth. You'll see how they withdraw when you need them most. How they ghost you emotionally even while sitting beside you. How they become cold, sarcastic, even cruel. Not because they stop loving you, but because your demand for real intimacy threatened their illusion. It's a dangerous game, because the narcissist will then flip the narrative. They'll accuse you of being needy, clingy, or controlling. They'll say you expect too much. They'll spiritualize it, moralize it, justify it, because they have to protect the image. They can't afford to admit that your desire for intimacy was never the problem. Their fear of exposure was, and here's the truth, real intimacy isn't for the faint of heart. It's for the healed, the humble, the honest. Narcissists can't give what they haven't cultivated within. They mimic love, but they don't embody it. They admire connection from afar, but they sabotage it up close. Because connection demands truth. And truth is the one thing they've spent their entire life avoiding. So when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, whether romantic, platonic, or even professional, you must understand that what you're being offered is not real intimacy. It is a transaction. You are giving your heart, your time, your empathy, and in return, you are being groomed for dependency. The narcissist doesn't want to be known. They want to be needed. There's a difference. And the moment you stop needing them, the moment you see them clearly, they retreat. Not because they are overwhelmed, but because they are exposed. They hate intimacy, not because they hate love, but because love makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability is the one currency they refuse to trade in. It is too costly. It asks too much. But for you, my friend, it's time to stop settling for pretend intimacy. You were not created to beg for connection. You were not born to chase emotional crumbs. You are worthy of love that shows up, love that tells the truth, love that removes the mask and says, here I am, flawed but present. That is real intimacy, and that is what you deserve. Don't be fooled by the act. Look past the performance. Guard your heart. And remember, if they truly loved intimacy, they'd stop hiding. Accountability is one of the most powerful forces in a healthy relationship. Yet for a narcissist, it is one of the most terrifying. They may dress it in agreeable words, pretend to welcome it, and act like they're open to self-improvement. But behind that polished exterior is a deep, consuming hatred for anything that exposes their flaws or challenges their narrative. You see, the narcissist survives by managing perception, not pursuing truth. They don't strive to be right in character. They strive to appear right in reputation. Accountability threatens the kingdom they've built on illusion. In the early stages of connection, a narcissist will often give the impression of being teachable. They'll say things like, I love feedback, or please be honest with me. But these statements are not invitations. They're performances. They are rehearsed lines to draw you in, to give you the impression of humility, when in fact they are setting a trap. Once they have you emotionally invested, your attempt to hold them accountable will be met with resistance, cloaked in self-righteousness or guilt projection. Try to confront them about something minor, and watch the mask begin to crack. What begins as a civil conversation quickly turns into a blame game. Suddenly your concern is labeled as criticism. Your tone is scrutinized more than your words, and somehow, by the end of the exchange, you feel like the problem. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. Narcissists hate accountability because it requires them to face something they've spent a lifetime avoiding: responsibility. Responsibility means they must admit that their actions have consequences, that their words can wound, that their choices affect others. But for a narcissist, admitting fault is not just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. It shatters the image they've worked so hard to curate. They are addicted to being admired, and accountability feels like rejection. So instead of receiving correction, they redirect it. Instead of owning their behavior, they spiritualize it, justify it, or deny it altogether. They might even quote scripture or philosophy to create a smokescreen around the truth. But listen carefully, truth doesn't need theatrics. Only lies do. Many people mistake a narcissist's surface-level apology for accountability. But accountability is not about saying I'm sorry. It's about doing something different after you've apologized. A narcissist will say sorry to end the conversation, not to change the behavior. Their sorry is transactional, not transformational. It is a peace offering laced with poison. Because if you stay long enough, you'll see the same patterns emerge again and again and again. Why? Because accountability was never in their heart. It was only in their mouth. The tragedy is that some of the most sincere, kind-hearted people end up entangled in these dynamics. You bring correction with love, thinking it will inspire growth. You speak truth gently, hoping it will lead to healing. But what you don't realize is that narcissists interpret accountability as an attack, not an opportunity. They don't view your honesty as a gift. They see it as an assault on their ego. So instead of growing, they retaliate. They may retreat into silence, play the victim, or gather others around them to vilify you for daring to tell the truth. This reaction can leave you confused, even questioning yourself. That's the power of manipulation. Narcissists twist accountability into offense, and you begin to wonder if you're the one who's too critical, too harsh, too demanding. But let me tell you this, someone who truly values growth will be thankful for accountability. They may not enjoy the discomfort, but they will respect the truth. They will lean into correction, not run from it. They will adjust, not attack. If a person consistently deflects accountability, then no matter how charming or spiritual they appear, they are not safe for your soul. One of the most dangerous things about narcissists is their ability to fake humility. They'll say things like, "I know I'm not perfect," or "God's still working on me." But those words are often smoke screens. They are not confessions of weakness. They are shields to avoid deeper confrontation. True humility doesn't just acknowledge imperfection. It invites inspection. If someone gets defensive the moment you bring up a concern, it's a sign that their humility is only skin deep. Narcissists may preach about accountability. They may post about it. They may even lead others in it. But when the spotlight turns on them, the story changes. They'll rewrite history, shift timelines, and create alternate realities to protect their image. Because accountability is not just about truth, it's about alignment. And narcissists do not want to align. They want to be applauded. They don't want to be corrected. They want to be crowned. To hold a narcissist accountable is to declare war on their ego. That's why they isolate people who confront them. That's why they slander those who tell the truth. And that's why they surround themselves with enablers rather than equals. They cannot handle the presence of someone who sees them clearly, because exposure is the enemy of manipulation. So if you've ever tried to hold someone accountable and were met with gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or silent treatment, understand this. You are not crazy. You are courageous. You're not being too harsh. You're being honest. And if they hate the truth, it's not because you said it wrong. It's because they don't want to live right. True growth requires accountability. But a narcissist only wants admiration, not transformation. And as long as they hate the mirror, they will keep hiding in the costume. You can't fix that. But you can choose not to participate in it. Walk in truth and let your clarity be your boundary. Authentic people are a mirror narcissists. Cannot stand to look in. They represent everything the narcissist wishes they were but cannot become without surrendering the very persona they've built their identity on. You see, authenticity threatens the illusion. It cuts through the performance. A narcissist thrives in environments where masks are worn, where appearances matter more than substance, and where image is worshipped more than integrity. So when someone enters their world who lives unapologetically in their truth, flawed yet real, vulnerable yet strong, that presence becomes a threat to their entire existence. The authentic person doesn't need validation from others because they are rooted in self-awareness. They know who they are, and more importantly, who they are not. They do not conform to gain favor. They do not shrink to make others feel big. They are not governed by trends, opinions, or applause. And that kind of stability exposes the internal chaos within a narcissist. Because while the narcissist is constantly adjusting their image to maintain control and admiration, the authentic person is simply living without effort, without manipulation, and without fear of being seen. To the narcissist, this is intolerable. They may smile, they may flatter, they may act like they admire the authentic individual, but behind the scenes, their mind is racing with thoughts of comparison and envy. How are they so secure? Why does everyone gravitate toward them without them trying? Why do they get attention without begging for it? These questions aren't asked with curiosity. They are asked with contempt, because the narcissist views life as a game of status. Every interaction is a chess move. Every relationship a power dynamic. Every compliment a currency. But to the authentic person, life is about alignment, not arrangement. It's about purpose, not performance. This difference in core values makes the relationship between a narcissist and an authentic person deeply unstable over time. At first, the narcissist may try to imitate the realness they see. They'll copy the language. They'll mirror the humility. They'll act as though they too value truth and vulnerability. But it's a shallow performance. They are not connecting to the spirit of authenticity. They are merely borrowing its mask. And because they haven't done the inner work to truly live in truth, the mask always slips. Eventually, the cracks begin to show. Their reactions betray them. Their manipulation becomes obvious. Their attempts at transparency feel rehearsed. And the authentic person, being grounded and discerning, begins to see through it. That moment of exposure creates an internal crisis for the narcissist. They realize they can't fool this person the way they've fooled others. They can't use charm, pity, or intimidation to gain control. Their usual weapons, gaslighting, triangulation, silent treatment, fall flat. The authentic person may feel the sting, but they don't fold, they don't beg, they don't dance for approval. They simply continue being who they are, unbothered by the theatrics, and that is infuriating for the narcissist. Because more than being rejected, they fear being irrelevant. More than losing you, they fear losing their grip on how you see them. And when that grip is broken, their illusion starts to collapse. What the narcissist doesn't understand is that authenticity cannot be faked. It must be lived. It is cultivated through pain, healed through humility, and sustained by inner alignment. It comes from facing your flaws, owning your failures, and surrendering the need to be anything other than what you were created to be. It is not performance. It is presence. And that presence will always disturb those who are still hiding behind personas. They will accuse the authentic person of being too much or not enough. They'll attempt to label them as selfish, disloyal, difficult, or disobedient. But these labels are merely weapons of deflection. Because in truth, the authentic person has exposed something the narcissist cannot deny. That real power comes from within, not from control over others. That freedom isn't found in dominance, but in self-ownership. That peace doesn't come from applause, but from alignment. The narcissist may try to discard or devalue this kind of person, but secretly, they will always remember them, because the authentic person left something no narcissist can ever duplicate. A standard, a mirror, a moment of clarity, that for once they weren't the smartest person in the room, that they couldn't manipulate their way into control, that they were seen, not for who they pretended to be, but for who they really are. And that being truly seen is the very thing they run from, even as they crave it. So while they may pretend to admire authenticity, make no mistake, it exposes what they fear the most, the truth. The truth about themselves, about their emptiness, and about the mask they wear daily. They may hate the light, but they'll always be drawn to those who carry it. And when you carry that light, don't dim it to make them comfortable. Let it shine. Because truth doesn't just expose, it liberates. Delayed gratification is one of the most powerful virtues a person can develop. It is the ability to resist the temptation of an immediate reward in order to receive something greater later. This principle is deeply rooted in maturity, discipline, and purpose. However, to a narcissist, delayed gratification is not just uncomfortable, it is offensive to their very nature. They are addicted to validation, addicted to immediacy, and addicted to results they haven't earned. But because they operate through pretense and illusion, they will often pretend to value patience and strategy, while secretly despising everything that comes with the process. A narcissist thrives in environments where outcomes are instant and appearances are everything. They want the reward without the labor, the title without the training, the praise without the pruning. And yet when they find themselves among purpose-driven people, individuals who are willing to go through the process, who are willing to wait, suffer, invest, and grow, the narcissist finds themselves exposed, not externally at first, but internally. Their internal lack of character begins to feel the weight of your discipline. Your endurance convicts their shortcuts. Your willingness to take the long road reminds them of their dependence on detours. So what do? They mimic your patience. They quote your principles. They speak like they value the journey. But inside they are growing agitated, anxious, and resentful. Because the truth is, delayed gratification demands something they are unwilling to offer. Surrender. Surrender of the ego. Surrender of control. Surrender of manipulation. And most importantly, surrender to the possibility that someone else's process may elevate them above the narcissist's illusion of superiority. It's important to understand that a narcissist's relationship with time is transactional. They don't invest, they calculate. They don't build, they scheme. Their version of waiting is simply stalling until an opportunity arises to regain the spotlight. They will say things like, "I believe in divine timing," or "everything happens when it's meant to." But those words are empty repetitions. They're not rooted in trust. They are weapons disguised as wisdom, used to manipulate people into staying connected to them while they figure out how to regain control. And the most dangerous part? Narcissists don't just hate delayed gratification for themselves. They hate it when others practice it too. Why? Because your endurance is a mirror to their emptiness. Your willingness to wait for the right person, the right door, the right time, the right calling. It exposes the fact that they can't sit still unless they're being worshipped. They can't handle silence unless they are the center of the conversation. They can't handle seasons of preparation unless they are being praised for potential. And when they realize you are not moved by immediate applause, they start to panic. Because it means you are not depending on them for validation. When a narcissist pretends to love the process, it is only to gain access to your trust. They will act like they admire your discipline, your strategy, your wisdom. But slowly, subtly, they will begin to erode your conviction with doubt. They'll ask why you're waiting so long. They'll tell you not to be too picky or suggest that you're missing your moment. Why? Because they want you to abandon the process and settle for the same shallow approval they survive on. They want you to need what they need. Because if you need what they need, you become easier to control. You see, when someone is truly committed to delayed gratification, they become immune to manipulation. You can't bribe someone who is anchored in purpose. You can't seduce someone who is loyal to the process. You can't rush someone who has already counted the cost. And that kind of person, that person terrifies the narcissist. Because no matter how loud the narcissist performs, that person won't be moved by noise, only by purpose. So the narcissist pretends. They pretend to be patient, to trust the timing, to value preparation. But the moment things don't revolve around them, their mask begins to slip. They become passive-aggressive, impatient, dismissive. They start sowing seeds of division, trying to paint your discipline as fear, your process as procrastination, your standards as arrogance. They need to discredit what they cannot imitate. Because to honor your discipline would mean acknowledging their own deficiency. But here's the truth that sets you free. When you choose delayed gratification, you are declaring that your purpose is worth the wait. You are choosing long-term identity over short-term image. You are saying, I would rather be ready in silence than exposed in a rush. And that declaration strips the narcissist of their power. It silences their manipulation. It disarms their tactics. Because you are no longer living for the moment. You are living for the mission. In a world of fast fame and instant attention, a person who waits is a threat. A person who prepares is powerful. And a person who denies the counterfeit to protect their calling is unstoppable. Never let a narcissist's impatience convince you to forfeit your process. Their love for speed is not about efficiency. It's about ego. But your wait is about worth. And what is truly valuable is never rushed, never begged for, and never handed over to those who only pretend to deserve it. Constructive criticism is one of the most powerful tools for personal growth, transformation, and refinement. It's a mirror held up in grace, not to shame, but to shape. To the secure, it is a gift. To the humble, it is fuel. But to the narcissist, it is war. They do not see feedback as a pathway to growth, but as an assault on their false self. And yet, they are masterful at pretending they welcome it. They will nod while you speak. They may even quote what you said in another room just to appear teachable. But what's happening beneath the surface is very different. Inside, your words feel like an ambush to their ego. Not because what you said was harsh, but because it dared to challenge the narrative they've created about themselves. The narcissist doesn't live in reality. They live in a projected version of it. A performance where they are the lead, the director, and the audience all in one. And when you offer feedback, you're rewriting their script. That's unacceptable to them. The tragedy is that a narcissist's entire identity is built on being perceived as wise, powerful, insightful, or spiritually mature, depending on the context. So they've learned to simulate growth. They've learned to smile at correction. But the smile is not agreement, it's strategy. It's their way of buying time, of masking resentment, of preparing a counter-narrative where you become the problem and they remain untouchable. After you give feedback to a narcissist, they may seem quiet at first. They may even appear contemplative. But don't be deceived. In their silence, they are sharpening arrows. They are calculating their response. It may not come in that moment, but it will come. Sometimes it's passive, a withdrawal of warmth. Other times it's more subtle, backhanded compliments or sarcastic remarks meant to devalue your credibility. And occasionally, it's overt, gaslighting, defensiveness, or even emotional rage, disguised as righteous indignation. You see, the narcissist cannot separate their behavior from their identity. When you say this action was harmful, they hear you are a failure. When you say I felt dismissed, they interpret it as an attack on their worth. So rather than process your words, they begin defending their image. And that's where the damage deepens. Because from that point forward, everything becomes a performance. They'll do things to look like they've changed, but nothing in their heart has shifted. They'll adjust their language, not from repentance, but from rehearsal. Because to them, being seen as right is more important than becoming real. This is why many people in relationship with narcissists walk away feeling crazy. You speak truth in love, and they twist it into cruelty. You try to address a pattern, and they reduce it to one little thing you're making too big a deal about. Over time, you begin to question your judgment, your tone, even your motives. That's the power of their deflection. They don't refute your words, they dismantle your confidence in giving them. And yet they keep pretending to be open, pretending to be growing, pretending to welcome counsel. They may even post quotes about accountability. They may lead groups, mentor others, or position themselves as people who value the truth. But it's not the truth they value, it's the appearance of valuing truth. Because truth requires transformation, and transformation requires surrender, and surrender requires humility. That's the one currency a narcissist cannot afford to spend. There is something sacred about being able to look in the mirror and say, I was wrong. It takes a secure soul to absorb correction without collapsing. But the narcissist has built their identity on the scaffolding of superiority. That scaffold is fragile. Every critique, no matter how gentle, feels like a blow to the entire structure. So they defend, they justify, they rewrite history. And sometimes they retaliate, emotionally, verbally, or relationally, to restore the upper hand. But here's the paradox. The more they avoid correction, the more they remain stagnant. They look successful, but inside they're stuck. They seem evolved, but their emotional growth is stunted. Why? Because they've traded the pain of progress for the comfort of pretense. And while they may fool many, they cannot fool time. Eventually, fruit tells the truth. So what do? You keep your clarity. You guard your peace. You stop expecting transparency from someone addicted to impression management. And most importantly, you don't shrink. You don't dilute your insight to preserve their illusion. If your honesty costs you access, it was never a relationship. It was an arrangement. And arrangements aren't built on truth. They're built on transactions. At the end of the day, growth is a choice. And if someone chooses the illusion of perfection over the process of becoming whole, let them go. You were not called to babysit broken egos. You were called to live in truth. Bold, loving, unshakable truth. The narcissist is never comfortable in the presence of someone who thinks for themselves. It's not just discomfort. They see it as a threat. Their entire structure of control is built on the assumption that they are the smartest voice in the room, the most insightful presence in your life, and the unquestioned authority of your environment. Independent thinkers don't submit easily to illusions. They question, they analyze, they discern, and that discernment is lethal to the narcissist's illusion of superiority. When you begin to think independently, you stop needing validation from people who offer it as a form of manipulation. That's dangerous to the narcissist, because their power is not in their presence. It's in your belief in their power. As long as they can shape how you see yourself, they control how you move. But the moment you begin to make decisions not based on guilt, fear, or the need for approval, their influence starts to decay. They can feel that loss of grip, and they don't respond with grace. They respond with subtle sabotage. They will call your independence rebellion. They will frame your discernment as disloyalty. They'll accuse you of pride simply because you no longer live off their praise. Why? Because the narcissist can only feel strong in a room of silence. Your voice, your questions, your clarity, it disrupts the silence they require to dominate. They don't want to answer real questions. They want to control the narrative. And independent thinkers refuse to let someone else write their story. They pretend to admire strong people, but they only do so to figure out how to neutralize them. They are students of strength, not because they want to grow, but because they want to mimic and manage it. If they can't change how you think, they'll try to change how others see you. This is when they begin to whisper, plant seeds of doubt, accuse you subtly, or highlight your mistakes, never to help you grow, but to keep others from respecting your clarity. To be an independent thinker in the presence of a narcissist is to be a light in a room that was built for shadows. They will try to dim you not with violence, but with subtlety. They will offer you conditional love that grows colder every time you say no. They'll move from praise to passive aggression, from attention to avoidance, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing what they needed to feel in control. But here's the truth. Independent thinkers can't be bought with attention, and they can't be tamed with guilt. You were not created to walk on eggshells for the sake of someone else's ego. You were created to walk in truth, in clarity, and in purpose. You don't need to apologize for seeing clearly. You don't need to shrink to fit someone else's insecurity. When you begin to think for yourself, you reclaim your authority. And narcissists don't fear losing you. They fear losing the ability to use you. They will often say things like, "You've changed," or "You're not who you used to be." But what they really mean is, you're not as easy to manipulate as you were before. They long for the days when your confidence was dependent on their compliments, when your decisions bent to their emotions, when your silence meant safety for them. But growth has a sound, and it's the sound of boundaries, clarity, and courage. The narcissist doesn't hate you. They hate the fact that you now see them, and once seen, their power diminishes. Independent thinking is not just a threat to their control. It exposes their lack of substance. When you ask questions, you realize they have few real answers. When you push past the charm, you find the insecurity beneath. When you move without their permission, they panic, not because you're wrong, but because their illusion of leadership depends on your dependence. But the kingdom principle is this: you were never meant to be ruled by fear or flattery. You were meant to be led by purpose and truth. Some of the most powerful moments in your life will come when you begin to say, "I don't agree," or "That doesn't feel right," or "I need to think about this for myself." These phrases disrupt the narcissist programming. They are not used to resistance that is calm, respectful, and unwavering. That's the kind of resistance they can't manipulate. Anger they can fight. Emotion they can exploit. But quiet strength, that unsettles them, because they have no weapon against it. So if you find yourself being punished, ignored, criticized, or labeled for simply thinking for yourself, you are not in the presence of love. You are in the presence of control. And you must make peace with the reality that not everyone will celebrate your freedom. Some people only loved you when they could lead you astray, when they could dress their ego in the costume of mentorship. But now that you've started walking in truth, the mask is falling off. Don't trade your clarity for connection. Don't shrink your thoughts to make someone else feel powerful. If your freedom offends them, it's not your freedom that's the problem. It's their hidden need to be a tyrant in disguise. Keep thinking. Keep questioning. Keep growing. Because you weren't born to be managed. You were born to lead. They clap when you rise. But watch closely. Their hands clap while their heart plots. When a narcissist sees someone else in the spotlight, something inside them shifts. It's not joy, though it may look like it. It's not pride, though they may say it is. It's a deep gnawing discomfort. You see, the narcissist views attention as a limited resource. To them, someone else being celebrated means there's less admiration left for them. So when you shine, they don't feel inspired. They feel threatened. They will act like your biggest supporter. They'll show up to your events, comment with fire emojis under your posts, even call you family in public. But behind the scenes, they're rehearsing strategies, not to build you up further, but to recenter the story around themselves. Because in their world, you can win, but not more than them. You can succeed, but only if they succeed faster. You can grow, but only if they still look like the source. Their version of support is transactional. They'll support you as long as they get the credit, or some form of secondary glory. If your success begins to garner genuine attention, especially admiration that doesn't include their name, they start to pull away. At first it's subtle. The conversations get colder. The compliments turn into comparisons. The energy shifts. Then comes the undermining. They may say things like, "Don't let this go to your head," or "You're lucky I introduced you to the right people," or "You wouldn't have done this without me." All of it sounds harmless, even humble, but it's poisoned with insecurity. They begin to plant doubt, not just in others, in you. They want you to question your capability, so you stay dependent on them, because if you truly believe you're enough on your own, you might leave them behind. And that is the narcissist's deepest fear: becoming irrelevant, being seen as unnecessary, because their identity is built on validation, not vision. Without attention, they feel invisible. And invisibility to them is a kind of death. So your light becomes their discomfort, not because it blinds them, but because it exposes them. Your elevation highlights the fragility of their self-worth. They begin to scramble for control. If they can't outshine you, they will try to dim you. This might come in the form of passive-aggressive jokes, withdrawing affection, or even aligning with people who oppose you. Not because those people are right, but because the narcissist needs a new platform, one that makes them look powerful again. But here's what's key. They rarely attack you directly. Open attacks are too obvious. They prefer subversion, silent sabotage. They'll distance themselves emotionally, but stay just close enough to take credit if things go well. Or say, I knew this would happen if things fall apart. It's all about positioning. If your spotlight ever fades, they want to be the one who gets the microphone, not the one holding the tissues. You may wonder, how can someone celebrate you in public, but secretly grieve your success in private? Because with narcissists, image is everything. They have learned how to mimic support without feeling it. They're not moved by your journey. They're moved by how your journey affects theirs. If you go too far, they feel left behind. If you rise too fast, they feel small. Your success becomes their shadow, and narcissists don't like to be in the dark. So what do? They try to reclaim the narrative. They start talking more about their own journey. They begin exaggerating their role in your story. I taught them everything they know. They were a mess until I stepped in. They reframe your growth as their generosity. And in doing so, they make your win feel like a shared credit, not your own achievement. Because in their mind, if they can't be the hero, they'll at least be the author. They also may try to compete subtly at first. If you're starting a business, they suddenly have a project they've been working on too. If you get engaged, they bring up how many people are in love with them. If you're celebrated for your integrity, they begin to highlight their own sacrifices. They're not trying to grow. They're trying to reclaim relevance. It's not inspiration. It's imitation wrapped in insecurity. And if none of that works, if your light just keeps shining, they might do what they fear most: disappear. Not because they want to let you go, but because staying too close while not being the center is intolerable. The narcissist can't handle being a supporting character in someone else's story. They must be the main attraction, the one with the final word, the person everyone circles back to. So when they leave, don't chase them. Don't try to explain your heart. Don't shrink to make them feel tall. Their departure is not your fault. It's a response to their fear. You didn't outgrow them to spite them. You grew because you were called to grow. You rose because you refused to stay grounded in manipulation. And if your light made them walk away, then they were never there for your purpose. Only their own platform. Celebrate anyway. Shine anyway. Walk boldly, even if their footsteps fall silent behind you. Because the truth is, your light doesn't make others small, it just reveals who refuses to grow. And that's not your burden to carry. When you establish a boundary with a narcissist, you ignite a silent war. Not because the boundary is wrong, not because it's unfair, but because it reminds them of something they refuse to accept: limits. Narcissists thrive in environments where control is disguised as care, where intrusion is disguised as intimacy. And boundaries? Boundaries are the gates that deny them access to both. The moment you say no, you're no longer a pawn. You become a threat. You're no longer a supplier. You become a challenger to their illusion of supremacy. They'll act like they respect your need for space, your desire for time, or your intention to think independently. But don't be deceived. Their agreement is often a performance, a strategic delay to study your walls so they can find the cracks. Because narcissists don't ask for access. They feel entitled to it. Your life, your emotions, your time, your resources, to them, these aren't gifts you choose to share. They're assets they believe they own. So when you say, I need time to think, or I'm not comfortable with that, or I'm not going to continue this conversation, they hear disrespect. They hear defiance. Because they don't process boundaries as protection. They interpret them as personal rejection. This is why many people find themselves feeling guilty for simply enforcing what should be basic human dignity. The narcissist doesn't just push back. They punish. Not always with rage or obvious conflict. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's a sudden coldness that whispers, "You've disappointed me." Other times they'll shift into charm mode, offering fake understanding, pretending to support your decision, all while waiting for the next opportunity to re-enter the space you've tried to seal off. The danger is that they don't come back the same way they left. They come through side doors. They come wrapped in apologies, cloaked in vulnerability, speaking your love language. But it's not restoration, it's reconnaissance. They're not rebuilding the bridge. They're studying the architecture so they can collapse it when you least expect it. They don't see boundaries as opportunities to grow in love. They see them as fences around something they want to control. This is why spiritual maturity is so essential when dealing with narcissists. You cannot navigate them with just emotion, because your compassion will be used against you. You need discernment. Discernment to know when to stand, when to speak, and when to walk away. Because the more you grow in identity, the less access they'll have to your peace. The more you embrace your worth, the less effective their manipulation becomes. And that's the real threat to them. Not your boundary itself, but what your boundary represents. Your boundary represents awareness. It says, "I see now." It says, "I know who I am and I know what I deserve." And for someone who depends on your confusion to maintain their illusion, that is devastating. Because as long as you are confused, they can control. But when you set a boundary, you disrupt the entire ecosystem they've built. You're no longer feeding the dynamic. You're no longer dancing to the music of their mood swings. You stop managing their emotions and start managing your own. Boundaries force narcissists to face their own reflection, and they don't like what they see. So instead of changing, they often blame. They'll twist your boundary into selfishness. You're cold, you're distant, you've changed. Yes, you have. You've awakened, you've evolved, and your evolution is not for their convenience, it's for your calling. You don't need permission to protect yourself. You don't need validation to walk in truth. Your boundary is not a wall, it's a filter. It doesn't block love, it blocks manipulation. It doesn't isolate you, it liberates you. But here's the challenge. Narcissists often play the long game. If one tactic doesn't work, they try another. If confrontation fails, they try flattery. If guilt doesn't land, they try gifts. But their goal remains the same. Regain access, reclaim influence, restore control. That's why consistency is your weapon. Not harshness, not cruelty, but firm, consistent, unapologetic clarity. No must mean no. I'm not available must not become maybe just this once. Because every time you allow a small compromise, they read it as an invitation. The truth is, narcissists don't fear your anger. They fear your boundaries. Because boundaries are the language of the free. Boundaries are how healed people speak. And the narcissist has no power over someone who knows they can walk away. So don't second guess yourself. Don't water down your convictions to make someone else comfortable. You're not being difficult, you're being deliberate. You're not being selfish, you're being safe. You don't owe unlimited access to someone who has only brought confusion and control. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself clarity. You owe yourself the protection of your purpose. Remember this, a person who truly loves you will honor your boundaries, not manipulate them. They will seek to understand, not override. They will grow with you, not guilt trip you. So if your boundary offends them, that tells you everything about why it's necessary in the first place.